Moving on to the rubric tasks, we open up the rubric and take a look at them. As I mentioned in the previous session, just all of these will be based off of following the written materials and getting all that working. That'll get you 60% of the assignment grade itself. And then the other part is made up by choosing the different lab tasks down here. Now this is editable by everyone, so if you are editing it and you notice things changing from other students and stuff like that, just don't worry about it. That's what the turn-in form comes in. You'll actually be saying specifically which ones you did. If you are just testing out, seeing what kind of grades you can expect from getting like a satisfactory on a couple of them and stuff like that, that is open to edit for you so that you can take a look at what you can expect for your grade. Moving on to the lab tasks and kind of describing them a little bit. So this first one is asking you to add the arrows to the actual movement similar to exactly how WASDA works. So we saw how to add keys and stuff like that inside the assignment 1. This one's asking you to demonstrate that you've learned how to add different inputs and things like that. One thing I will say is watch out for the satisfactory or unacceptable categories. The way this rubric works, if you do get the superior category and everything is working without anything from the satisfactory or unacceptable, then you do get 100%. If, for example, you get the arrows added, but one of the arrows isn't quite working correctly, you will just get satisfactory, which is going to be 60%. So if we take a look at a preview of that, we see we earn only 3 points for that task versus the full credit of 5. The unacceptable category, it means you didn't quite get it working or you did something that's counterintuitive. So if multiple arrows aren't working correctly, you really kind of missed the mark on this one. There's only 4 arrows and adding 4 inputs. Very straightforward, duplicating exactly how we added them in assignment 1. The other thing in here, it says, or if you created brand new axes and stuff like that. So this is reinforcing that idea of we don't necessarily need to create new axes or actually change code to just add inputs. We can just add them to existing axes that exist. We have the move forward and move right. Those should be the only 2 that we have. There's no reason to have our arrow keys added under any different things. So that's basically just replicating something that we've done before. This one's asking you to replicate something that we've done before, just in a slightly different way, adding a health pickup to our game. So taking a look at how we're creating our damage pickup would probably be a good spot because that's already affecting our current health. We do have the other pickup, but that's actually modifying a maximum value. So definitely want to just modify the current health, not our maximum health that we have. So for superior on this, when you hit this pickup, it adds health back, just like a health pack or something like that, but should never actually go above the maximum health. That's where that clamp comes in from our current take damage. We saw how to clamp a value and things like that. If you do get it working and it's just straight up adding like 5 to the health and you already had full health and you hit it and now you have 10 out of 5 health, that'd be over the maximum. So you kind of got it working, but are doing a little bit backwards of letting it go above that maximum health. We want to make sure you're reinforcing those things taught from things that are just gone over in the documents, like that clamp and stuff, showing that you can use those different topics. Unacceptable is if that current health never changes. So one thing I often see when students are attempting this one is they'll go ahead and just copy that add to max ammo, but that just modifies our maximum health. That's not modifying our current health. So you should focus on how our damage works. If you think about it, adding health is like taking away damage or negating damage. So just a couple of hints on that one. And then this one. This one's a good one. It's one of the first research ones that does take you to one of the example projects that you should have created from either the research or ILA tasks or assignments rather. This one's saying, look at the third person template from the Unreal launcher. And what it's specifically to look at, because there's a lot in there. We'll go ahead and open that up. Epic Games Launcher. And one of the research assignments shows how to create it and then has you look at the animation blueprint and stuff so you can start navigating in there. I have a third person example right here. So we'll open that up and you see I am navigated to the animations to highlight the third person animation blueprint. And before I get ahead of myself, this one does ask you to create a blend space for the idle, walk, then run. What the blend space does and how it works and stuff is part of that research assignment. So if we take a look at their animation blueprint, and close out of some of the default stuff, I want to take a look at what their anim graph looks like. They have a state machine just like ours. We open that up, and their idle and run is set in just one node rather than separate as two different states. As we increase speed, we notice it rather than just hopping between idle and run, it's kind of at a walking pace. As we keep going faster, getting up to actually run speed, it gets into a full-on sprint. They do that by having this state run through a 1D blend space. The blend space itself is right here for reference. You can open that up, kind of look through how they have different values set and things like that. But going beyond that, seeing how they set this up, what this is, I'm going to close out of everything except the level view. Inside the third person BP folder, there's something called a third person overview. In this is actually a tutorial that's built in Unreal. If you click this little triangle and inside the triangle, not outside, so you want the normal pointer option to launch it, we can launch it, and it launches an inside Unreal tutorial that you can navigate through, kind of see how things are laid out, which is great. But one other thing I want to point out is that on the very first page, there's a link to a video playlist. If we click that, this is how they basically created that third person stuff and goes over a lot of different topics. Is incredibly useful. Specifically speaking about the blend spaces, that starts at number 7. So watching through 7, through how they actually integrate it to the animation graph and animation blueprint and stuff like that, that gets down to 11. So 7, 11. So just keep those in mind when you are checking out the content for how to get a blend space working, what is a blend space in general, things like that. They do a really good job of kind of explaining it. One other thing is that the interface that they are using is a bit older. This is done in 2017, so that is why you have the other project itself right here. We have you actually create that project. You can see what the new interface looks like with all the settings done. The biggest change, I believe, is on the animation itself for the thing. They'll have a section over here. They've moved this section rather than having all the settings and stuff down here. Up here in the asset details, they have the axis settings laid out right here. So just heads up while you are attempting that one. You'll also notice that this tutorial is still here. You can just click the little drop down and exit the tutorial when you're done with it and relaunch it whenever you need it. All right, so that's for the blend space. Moving on, so in the documents, we actually walk through for that part number 6 of showing you how to actually stop our character from moving while it's playing in an animation. Then when the animation's finished, set that movement back to walking. That's done for our reload only. This one's asking you to replicate that same kind of thing of disabling the movement and starting it back up on the attacking so our feet aren't sliding as much. Moving on to the next one. We've taken a look at how our weapon can actually spawn objects, how it's spawning our projectile and things like that. This one's asking you for when a character dies, they should drop a pickup or spawn a pickup. So when the character dies, shows the entire death animation. Then the character itself gets destroyed from the world, and also a random element for full credit on this one. So we haven't talked about the random, so that will take a bit of research about how to do something randomized. One of the quickest ways to do this is just going in to a blueprint and taking a look at what options are available for you. For example, if I'm on my character and I just right click and we see this is right here in the character death exec, I would want it to spawn and stuff for both when the disable input or any of the other enemies that are just placed in the level to do something. So if we add a node of like spawn and spawn actor from class, that's how we're telling it what to spawn. We can specify through here or something like that. We could have both of these go right in here, tell it what to spawn, where we want to spawn it. If we wanted to branch or have 2 different options for spawn, you could plug it into a branch, the other part with that. If we take a look at random, there's a lot of different random stuff. So don't get overwhelmed with that. Easiest thing to start off with is bool. Bools only have 2 values. Random bool will give me true or false. Well, if I wanted 2 different options, that can be plugged right into a branch. And we can have a true branch or a false branch rather than just going straight through in an exec line. So if we only have 2 pickups, that would work out fantastic. We could have one spawn, say, spawn the damage pickup, the other spawn set to a max ammo pickup. If we have the health pickup and stuff, we could add another branch onto that if it does fail one of them and stuff like that, and keep going. Or we could do a random int between range and things like that and do some more branching, actually comparing. So that's just a couple ideas of how to get the randomized. If you do get a pickup spawning, but it's only one type of pickup that can be spawned, that'll still get you partial credit, that's 60%. If you do get it spawning, but the character's left in the world, as in the character doesn't destroy itself after, or for example, if it doesn't quite show the entire death animation before the spawn happens or before the character gets removed, things like that. If it just removes as soon as it's told died, doesn't play the death animation, then that would only be satisfactory. No pickup spawning, obviously for something that asks for when they die, they should spawn a pickup, would be unacceptable. Or if the pickup spawned at a completely different location, for example, if you kill a character over on one side of the level and the pickup just spawns at origin, then that would also be considered unacceptable. So you have to make sure you are spawning it at your character's position. So it does seem like the character dropped that pickup that died. Moving on to the next one, blending the health bar from its start color to red, so from green to red as the health actually goes down. This one asks you to take a look at one of the reference examples in the math map. There's a lerp to change between colors for red and green. And you can take a look at how to change your actual setting or color of that. We hard-coded it to green inside our HUD. Our health bar is always green. We just kind of set it to a color. But we do have the option to bind it same way that we did our percent. We could actually check what our health is and stuff like that. So getting our health value, this one's returning instead of a float, it needs a linear color structure. If we do pull off that, there's a really useful thing called lerp, which it stands for linear interpolation. And how that function works, it takes two values, a start value and an end value. So alpha is actually looking for a ratio between 0 and 1. It'll be 100% of A when alpha is 0, or 100% of B when alpha is 1. If it was 0.5, if we have that bar halfway full, it should be blending between these two different colors. So in here, we can just ask our character for what its health ratio is, pass that into our alpha, and make sure to set up these colors appropriately. And I do want to remove that binding so it's not stuck on there. So moving on from there, satisfactory would be like if you're just checking if it's halfway, if it's below like 0.5, then set it red. If it's not using that lerp, would be considered satisfactory. But I just showed you the exact function for lerp and kind of explained how to work with it. So you should be able to work on that. Our next part up. So we've added health to our character. This is asking for adding shields. Our shields will be just another layer of health. They should be represented by another bar on the HUD, update during the game. So basically duplicating all of our health steps to get them kind of updating and everything. And then the other part with this is that the shields need to be depleted first, and then our health should be taking damage. One thing when you are going to implement this, do not create another killable component. Just add that functionality onto our current killable. Our killable already has it lined up specifically for the two variables that we need for health. You can add those new variables for shield right here. And our take damage, before we would take any damage, we could just check, do we have shields? Is our current shields greater than 0? If so, then we'd send our damage to shields. And sending those would be basically duplicating all this down here. Just instead of using health values, you'd have another value storing how much shield it has. So that one's pretty straightforward, just basically duplicating everything, but in place of health, add shields. And then the only tricky part is making sure that before you run anything in the exec line when you're taking damage, making sure you find out what you should set before just immediately setting the health or setting the shields and then checking and stuff like that. So where you create that branch, can make a difference of how that's working. Next up, adding a gun model to our base character. So we've provided a gun model as well as some animations. This one does require a little bit of research on how to attach an object to another object. One thing I would recommend looking into is something called a parent socket. And for example, when you are looking for anything UE4 related, I do recommend using UE4 and then saying, for example, attach to parent socket. And you'll find several different resources. There's videos and things like that. I would recommend just trying to do a bit of research on that one for the attached portion. Then the other part of this is swapping out all the animations to the gun animations. So attaching is going to be the easy part for this. The new animation sets are different and will require a lot of understanding of how the transitions work, what different things they're actually adjusting for, making sure that the new animations were chosen for a specific reason. For example, the new shoot animation, or the gun shoot animation, is very short. So short, in fact, that if we take a look at how our animation works, our return from attack is set to an automatic rule. Our automatic rule takes into account our default blend duration. That's currently set to 0.2. Automatic rule means 0.2 before our animation finished, we will transition. We would have to drop this if we're using a shorter animation that's only 0.2 seconds long. So that's something to look out for when you are working on the new transitions. Same goes for like the reload. Our reload is taking a look at specifically an animation, how much time is remaining on the reload animation. And that's because our reload itself, our reload state, is telling it to play a reload animation. If we do swap this and just grab the rifle version, reload rifle hip is the new reload animation. If we watch that now, we're no longer playing reload. We're playing reload rifle hip. So there's a couple of things you're going to need to watch out for, changing those transitions around and adjusting some of the settings in here to allow it to fully work. This was showing you just a quick way of, rather than dragging everything on the graph, recreating all the connections, you can swap out the animations right here. Just whatever this state is telling it to play as an example. So it saves you a lot of time rather than recreating this entire graph for the gun animations. The other part for this is adjusting our shoot location socket that we've created. Where that bullet's spawning, it should spawn from the tip of the gun instead of the tip of the hand. And if some of the animations were not changed and you couldn't get those transitions working and stuff, that would be just satisfactory. If it's only added to the player, because there are many different ways to attach, so make sure that it's on all the base characters, not just the player. So if you do see anything talking about like a level blueprint and stuff, I do not recommend continuing with that tutorial for the attaching. You should just focus on how it can be done on the blueprint itself, not the level blueprint. If the gun doesn't follow the animation and you just threw the static mesh on there or the skeletal mesh on there and it's just kind of there and not actually attached to our character, that'd be unacceptable. Or if the character can't shoot based on bugs, whether that's where the shoot location is or whether the animations aren't actually playing correctly, so it's never telling it when it's ready to fire, things like that would be unacceptable. So that's a couple of things to watch out for on there. Now, if we take a look at an example project with all of this working and play through this, we see we have several different characters all added over here so that we can test out the random spawning. We have shields over here showing up underneath our health. The health pickup is represented by this other chest. We also threw on a rotating component just to make it stand out a little bit. That's unnecessary. As we take damage, we see our shield took damage. Our health is still full until our shield is fully depleted. And so once our shield's gone, we can take some more damage. And we notice that health bar has started shifting. It's no longer at bright green, it's shifting towards orange and getting even redder as that health goes down. If we hit the health pickup, should fill our health back up. If we actually go through and kill these enemies, we see our gun is attached and animating and everything. Our animations have all been swapped out. We're no longer crouching for our reload and stuff like that. And we can shoot. Each one of these was just for quick testing purposes. We set the health to 1 of each of these characters, so you can see the different random spawns of those different pickups. And the second time we play, it will spawn a different pickup based on random values. The other part to this is that our character, if we're running and we shoot, it will actually stop our character. So it's no longer going to have that problem of having the legs get stuck while it's shooting, or having the legs ski, I guess.
Would there be a way to have the character's legs still running and then have the top part of the body still play the shoot animation?
Yes, there there is definitely a way, and in assignment 3 we'll be taking a look at how we could set that up for our herd animation. The reason why I didn't set that up for assignment 2 is because you're still getting kind of the hang of the basic transitions between the states, and touching on an advanced topic like blending of the upper body versus the lower body using an animation montage or something like that would be a bit more advanced than you're ready for at this stage. So we're getting the basics down first, getting all that functionality of just being able to say, when this bool's true, we're going to play we're going to switch to this state, and getting more familiar with the state switching first before we move on to the other part.
All right, that's fair. Thanks.
All right. So with this, if we take a look back at the materials for it, right next to the materials in the Google Drive, there is a docs.done.zip, which has a build of the documents done, which is basically this first project of just showing how things should be working, following along with the documents, as well as a labs done zip, which is a build of this second project, kind of so you can pull this up and test things out, see how things are intended to be working for that. Along with each one of those, there is a done notes as well. So this kind of shows an example of, let me get rid of this real quick. There we go. For this, it kind of describes the different features, all the controls and everything, how everything should be working, quick sample images of what they look like, and description of how different things are set up. One big thing is like when they're talking about the blend space, we had to modify some acceleration and braking values and stuff like that to actually get a demonstration of that versus just immediately going full sprint as soon as we press W. So some of the design choices like that rotation movement component, things like that were added, just making better notes about what you may want to change or things like that. So that should give you an example of how they should be functioning. So in an executable, playable by yourself on your own computer, just so you can have it side by side your project rather than just watching back through the lecture and seeing how things function on this. All right, so that basically wraps up assignment 2 that is due on Wednesday. So please keep that in mind, just in 2 days, 7 hours. So other than that, were there any questions that you guys had about any of the rubric tasks, any of the content that we went through today?
This whole video is also included in the recordings, right?
Yes, I'm recording this section as well.
Cool.
Yep. Actually, on that note, in the assignment itself, there is a link to the lecture playlist. So lecture playlist has some previous recordings that go through the different things. There's the intro, the assignment 1 walkthrough, submission prep, assignment 2 overview, which was like the first portion that we did today, as well as the lab task review, all pre-recorded. And as soon as this one gets done converting, I will be adding it to the bottom here with the title of the date. Alrighty?
Thank you.
No problem. All right.